I sold my own masterpiece, a piece I'd poured my soul into for months, to finally afford a down payment on a small house for me and my daughter. The day the sale went through, my mother called me, not to congratulate me, but to tell me she had used the entire deposit, every last cent, to pay for my brother's third failed startup. When I broke down, she told me, family invests in potential, not in hobbies. Then she hung up. My dream wasn't just delayed, it was incinerated. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just going to get my money back. I was going to dismantle the entire system they had built on my back. It had taken me 6 months to restore the old secretary desk. It wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a ghost. When I bought it at a derelict estate sale, it was covered in water stains and grime. One of its delicate cabriolet legs snapped clean off. But I saw the bones of it. I saw the hand-carved details hidden under layers of neglect. The faint, almost invisible inlay of mother-of-pearl along the drawers. I spent nights in my small workshop, a converted garage that always smelled of sawdust and tung oil, painstakingly bringing it back to life. My daughter, Chloe, would sometimes come and watch, her 7-year-old eyes wide with wonder as I fitted a new piece of reclaimed mahogany into place, sanding it until the seam was invisible. "You're like a doctor for wood, Mommy," she'd say. That desk was my ticket out. I had a collector, a wealthy woman from the city who'd seen my work online, who had agreed to buy it for a price that felt like a lottery win. It was enough for a down payment on a small 2-bedroom cottage in a town with a better school district, a yard for Chloe to play in, a life that wasn't lived in the shadow of my family's constant, suffocating needs. My brother, Ethan, was the family's designated genius. He had a new, visionary tech startup every 6 months, each one more destined to change the world than the last. And each one would inevitably crash and burn, leaving my parents to pick up the pieces, which always meant calling me. I was the stable one, the practical one, the one with a tangible skill that actually paid the bills, while Ethan was disrupting paradigms with venture capital he'd sweet-talked out of some investor. I was the one they called when their car broke down, when the roof leaked, when they needed a few $100s to tide them over until Ethan's next big funding round came through. I never said no, because that's what you do for family, right? You show up, you help, you sacrifice. My own dreams were always quiet, always something for later. But the desk was supposed to be the beginning of later. The sale was finalized on a Tuesday. The money was wired to my account that afternoon. It felt unreal, looking at that number on my banking app. It was more than just money. It was freedom. It was the smell of fresh paint in a new house, the sound of Chloe laughing in her own backyard. I didn't tell my parents about the sale immediately. I wanted to hold the victory for myself, just for a little while. I wanted to surprise them with the news that I was finally moving out, finally standing on my own 2 feet, completely independent of the gravitational pull of their constant crises. That was my mistake. I underestimated how quickly their emergencies could eclipse my joy. That evening, the phone rang. It was my mother, her voice tight with a manufactured panic I knew all too well. "Maya, thank God. We have a situation." I felt the familiar cold dread creep into my stomach. It was Ethan. Of course it was Ethan. His latest venture, a curated social media platform for artisanal pet owners, had gone under. Not just gone under, but he owed his developers, and they were threatening legal action. "He just needs a bridge loan, honey," my mother said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. "Just to get him to the next phase. He has new investors lined up. They're just waiting for him to clear this little hurdle." I should have said no. I should have told her I had my own life, my own future to think about. But the years of conditioning, of being the family fixer, were too strong. I tried to hedge. "Mom, I can't. Things are tight right now." It was a weak lie, and she knew it. "Maya, this is your brother's future. He is on the verge of something huge. You have that little business of yours. You're always fine. He needs this." The comparison was always there. My little business versus his huge future. My tangible success versus his abstract potential. She asked for my online banking details. She said she and my dad would pool their money and just needed my account to consolidate the funds before paying the developers. She promised it would only be in my account for an hour, a simple pass-through. Against every screaming instinct in my body, I gave her the login. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself they wouldn't dare. I watched the clock for an hour, then 2. I checked my account. The money was gone. All of it. The entire down payment. I called my mom. She didn't pick up. I called my dad. Straight to voicemail. I texted Ethan. "Where is my money?" A few minutes later, a text came back. Not from Ethan, but from my mother, using his phone. "It's been handled. Ethan's future is secure. We'll talk tomorrow." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my workshop, the empty space where the beautiful secretary desk used to be, and I felt a rage so pure and cold it scared me. It wasn't just about the money. It was the complete and utter disregard for my life, my work, my dreams. They hadn't just taken my down payment. They had taken my 6 months of labor, my artistry, my hope, and fed it to the bonfire of my brother's ego. The next morning, I got the call. It was my mother, her voice bright and cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "I'm so glad we could count on you, honey," she said. "You really saved the day." I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "You stole my down payment. That was my money for a house for me and Chloe." There was a pause. Then the sigh. The long, weary sigh of a martyr dealing with an ungrateful child. "Maya, don't be so dramatic. It's just money. It can be made again. Your brother's career, his spirit, that's a fragile thing. We had to protect it. You should be proud you were in a position to help. Family invests in potential, not in hobbies." And then she hung up. Hobbies. 600 hours of labor, a masterpiece of restoration that brought a seasoned collector to my door, was a hobby. I looked at my hands, at the calluses and the faint scars from a slipped chisel. I thought of Chloe's face, so full of pride for her wood doctor mom. That wasn't when I cried. That was when I started to plan. The family bank was officially closed, and they were about to find out their biggest asset was filing for bankruptcy. The first thing I did wasn't explosive. It was quiet. It was logistical. My workshop, the garage I had converted with my own hands and money, was attached to my parents' house. I paid them a nominal rent for it, but the electricity was wired into their main breaker box. For years I hadn't cared. The bill was negligible compared to the convenience. But now, that connection felt like a leash. So that weekend, while they were out celebrating Ethan's narrow escape from consequences, I called an electrician. I paid him an exorbitant weekend rate to come and install a separate meter and breaker box for the workshop. I wanted a clean break, a utility bill with my name on it, and my name alone. When he was done, he handed me the key to the new locked box. "All yours now," he said. "No one can mess with your power unless they come through you." It was a small act, but it felt monumental. It was the first brick in a new wall. That evening, my dad came by the workshop. He saw the new meter on the side of the wall and frowned. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing to the metal box. "Just getting things properly separated," I said, not looking up from a piece of wood I was sanding. Figured it was time I paid my own way. He didn't get it. Not really. He just saw it as me being strange. "Well, don't go running up a huge bill," he mumbled. "Your mother is already stressed enough." I just nodded. There was no point in explaining. They didn't speak the language of boundaries. They only understood access and denial. A few days later, the real fallout began. Ethan called me. It was the first time he'd called me directly in months. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't mention the money. He launched straight into his problem. "Hey, my table saw just died. The motor's shot. I need to borrow yours for a few weeks to build some prototypes for my new pitch." He said it so casually, as if he were asking to borrow a cup of sugar. As if he hadn't just been the beneficiary of the complete theft of my future. My table saw wasn't just a tool. It was a sawstop. An incredibly expensive piece of equipment I'd saved for 2 years. Its main feature was a safety mechanism that could stop the blade within milliseconds of contact with skin. A feature I'd invested in because I worked alone, often late at night. It was the heart of my workshop. "No," I said. It was the calmest, coldest word I'd ever spoken to him. Silence on the other end of the line. He actually laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "What do you mean, no? I need it. It's for my work." "I need it for my work too, Ethan," I replied. "You know, my hobby." The sarcasm was sharp, and it landed. His voice changed. The casual entitlement turned into a whine. "Maya, come on. Don't be like this. Mom told me you were being weird about the money. It's just a loan. We'll pay you back once the new funding comes in." "There is no we," I said. "And you're not borrowing my saw. The answer is no." I hung up the phone before he could respond. An hour later, my mother was at my door. Not the workshop door, but the door to the small apartment I rented above it. She didn't knock. She used her key. "What is your problem?" she started, her face flushed with anger. "You're punishing your brother for our decision. We were the ones who took the money. He needed it. Why are you being so selfish?" I just looked at her. Selfish? You stood in my way of giving my daughter a home, a backyard, a better life, and you call me selfish? You need to leave, Mom, and I need my key back. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The idea of me demanding a key back, of revoking her access, was so foreign it short-circuited her brain. "I'm your mother," she finally stammered. "I don't need your permission to be here." "This is my apartment," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "You're no longer welcome here unannounced. Give me the key." She threw it on the table, a flash of metal clattering against the wood. "Fine," she hissed. "When you're ready to stop this ridiculous tantrum and be part of the family again, you know where to find us." She slammed the door on her way out. I stood there, my heart pounding, and realized this was only the beginning. They hadn't learned a thing. They just thought I needed to be managed. This wasn't the first time they had sacrificed me for Ethan. It was just the most expensive. My mind kept flashing back to high school. We were both in the same advanced art class. The final project was a juried competition for a scholarship to a summer arts program. I had spent weeks on my piece, a complex multi-layered woodcut print of a cityscape. It was intricate, difficult work. I was proud of it. Ethan, as usual, had waited until the last minute. His project was a large abstract canvas, but he couldn't get the colors right. He kept complaining that it looked muddy and uninspired. The night before the project was due, I was in the garage, which even then was my makeshift studio, putting the finishing touches on my print. I went inside to get a drink of water. When I came back, maybe 10 minutes later, I saw it. A can of black ink had been accidentally knocked over, spilling directly across the most detailed section of my woodblock. It was ruined, completely unsalvageable. My dad was there, looking flustered. "Oh, Maya, I'm so sorry," he said, holding a rag. I was just moving some things, and I must have bumped the table. I knew he was lying. His hands didn't have a drop of ink on them. And standing in the shadows behind him, I could see Ethan, who refused to meet my eyes. He just stared at the floor, a picture of false guilt. I didn't have time to make a new block. I had nothing to submit. Ethan, however, suddenly found his inspiration. He took his muddy canvas and painted over large sections of it with bold, black strokes, creating a dramatic high-contrast piece. He won the scholarship. At the time, I didn't fight. I just cried in my room. My mother came in later and told me how proud they were of Ethan. When I tried to tell her what I suspected happened, she just patted my hand and said, "Don't be a sore loser, honey. Your brother has a real gift. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the truly talented ones in the family. Your turn will come." But my turn never came. It was always his turn. His needs, his deadlines, his potential. My scholarship was a sacrifice. My time was a sacrifice. My tools were a community resource. And now, my daughter's future was just the latest offering laid at the altar of Saint Ethan, the patron saint of perpetual failure. Thinking about that ink stain, I felt the same cold fury I'd felt then. But this time, it wasn't mixed with the helplessness of a teenager. It was the focused anger of a woman who had just been pushed too far. They didn't just see me as the family ATM. They saw me as fundamentally less important. My successes were small and quaint. My ambitions, secondary. They had been actively sabotaging me in favor of my brother my entire life, dressing it up in the language of family and support. I went back into the workshop. I looked at the empty space where the desk had been. I thought about the thousands of dollars and the hundreds of hours that had vanished. I wasn't going to just ask for it back. Demanding it felt too small, too transactional. This wasn't a debt to be repaid. it was a violation to be answered. I walked over to a dusty corner of the shop where a pile of canvases was leaning against the wall. They were Ethan's. Canvases I had stretched for him, frames I had built because he couldn't be bothered with the grunt work. There were at least a dozen of them, all blank, all waiting for the genius to strike. I picked one up, feeling the taut fabric under my fingers. And I had an idea. It was petty. It was symbolic. And it was exactly what they deserved. The next day, I started a new project. I took one of Ethan's pristine, professionally stretched canvases, a large 4x5-foot frame I had built for him last Christmas, and I began to paint. I'm not a painter. My art is in the grain of wood, in the shape of a line. But I knew color. I knew composition. I painted a landscape, a brutal one. A barren tree with deep roots clawing into dry, cracked earth. The sky was a toxic yellow. It wasn't about creating beauty. It was about purging the ugliness I felt inside. When it was done, I mounted it on the outside of my workshop door, facing their house, like a flag. I didn't say a word. I just let it hang there. It took them 2 days to react. Ethan was the one who confronted me. He stormed into the workshop, his face livid. "What the hell is that?" he yelled, pointing at the painting. "You ruined a perfectly good canvas." "Your canvas?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I built the frame. I stretched the canvas. I paid for the materials. At what point did it become yours, Ethan? When you intended to use it?" "It was a gift," he sputtered. "You can't just take back a gift and destroy it." "Funny," I said, putting down my handplane and turning to face him fully. "I feel the same way about the 6 months of my life you and Mom and Dad turned into cash for your failed app. You want to talk about destroying things? Let's talk about the heirloom desk I was restoring for a client." "A client, Ethan? A signed contract?" His face went pale. "What are you talking about? Mom said you sold that desk you made." "The one I restored, Ethan. The one that belonged to my client, Mrs. Albright. It was a priceless 18th century piece she had entrusted to me. The money you took wasn't mine. It was hers. A deposit she paid me for the work." It was a lie, a calculated, powerful lie. The desk had been mine to sell. The money was my own. But they didn't know that. All they knew was that I did restorations for wealthy clients. The possibility that they had stolen from a powerful outsider, not just from me, was a scenario they had never considered. Ethan was speechless. The blustering anger drained out of him, replaced by a pasty, slack-jawed fear. "You're lying," he whispered, but there was no conviction in it. "Am I?" I let the question hang in the air. "Mrs. Albright's lawyers have been trying to get in touch. I've been putting them off. I told them there was a family emergency. But my goodwill only stretches so far. I need her money back. The full amount. By Friday. Or I'm turning over all of your names to her legal team. And a woman who owns a desk like that. Ethan, her lawyers are not the kind you can ignore." He stumbled backward, out of my workshop, the swagger he always wore completely gone. He didn't know he was caught in a fiction. All he knew was that for the first time in his life, the consequences he'd always dodged were about to land, and I wasn't going to be there to soften the blow. My mother appeared a few hours later. The fury was gone, replaced by a cloying, desperate sweetness. "Maya, honey, We need to talk. Your brother is beside himself. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I didn't invite her in. I stood in the doorway of the workshop, blocking her entry. There's no misunderstanding, Mom. You took money that didn't belong to you. You committed theft, and now there are consequences. It's really that simple. But from a client, she wailed, her voice cracking. Why didn't you tell us? We thought it was your money. And that would have made it okay? I shot back. That's the part I can't get over. You knew that money was for a house for your only granddaughter, and you took it anyway. The fact that it might have belonged to someone else doesn't make you less guilty. It just makes you more stupid. The insult hit her like a slap. Her face hardened. You watch your tone, young lady. We are your parents. We have done everything for you. No, I said, the word like a stone. You have done everything for him. I was just the resource you used to do it. You have until Friday to get me that money. Every single cent. Or I'm calling my client and telling her the truth. I closed the door in her face, the click of the lock echoing in the sudden silence. I leaned against it, my body trembling, not with fear, but with a terrifying, liberating power. I had lied. I had manipulated them. I had used their own selfishness against them. I was becoming something I never thought I would be, and I wasn't sure if I should be proud or horrified. The fallout was swift and ugly. The next 48 hours were a storm of frantic calls, weeping voicemails, and texts that ranged from threatening to pleading. My father left me a message, his voice heavy with disappointment, telling me I was tearing the family apart over money. My mother sent a barrage of texts, claiming they were trying to take out a second mortgage to pay me back, that I was ruining their credit, that I was going to make them homeless. It was all performance. I knew their house had been paid off for years. Ethan was the worst. He swung between pathetic groveling and vicious rage. One message would be, Maya, I'm sorry. I'll pay you back. I swear. I'll get a job. Just call off the lawyers. The next would be, you've always been jealous of me. You love seeing me fail. This is all your fault. I didn't respond to any of them. I just watched the storm rage from the quiet eye of my workshop. Friday came. At 10 a.m., a wire transfer appeared in my account for the full amount. I stared at the number. A wave of relief so intense it almost made me sick. I had won. I had forced them to undo what they had done. But the victory felt hollow, metallic. It didn't fix the gaping hole they had blown in the middle of our relationship. A few hours later, a car pulled up. It was my mother. She got out and walked towards the workshop, not with anger, but with a look of grim resolution. She was carrying a cardboard box. Here, she said, thrusting the box at me. I hope you're happy. I looked inside. It was my grandfather's tools. He had been a master cabinet maker, and when he passed away, he left them to me, not to my father or Ethan. A set of antique hand planes with rosewood handles, chisels so perfectly weighted, they felt like an extension of my own hands. A collection of Japanese saws with blades as thin as paper. They were my most prized possessions, the physical link to the man who had inspired my career. They were ruined. The wooden handles of the planes were splintered and stained, as if they'd been soaked in something corrosive. The blades of the chisels were chipped and blunted, some of them bent at an angle. A dark, sticky substance that smelled like paint stripper coated everything. They hadn't just been damaged. They had been intentionally destroyed. I looked up at my mother, my throat closing. I couldn't speak. "Ethan was upset," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "He went into the workshop last night while you were out. He said you had no right to hold that money over our heads, that you needed to be taught a lesson about what happens when you disrespect your family." She didn't sound sorry. She sounded righteous. She was delivering the punishment. This was the consequence for my rebellion. They couldn't control my money anymore, so they had destroyed my history, my inheritance, my ability to work. I slowly looked from the box back to her face. Something inside me didn't just break. It turned to dust and blew away. The anger, the hurt, the desire for justice. It was all gone. In its place was nothing. A vast, silent emptiness. "Get off my property," I whispered. My voice was so low she barely heard it. "What?" she asked. I lifted my head and looked her directly in the eye. The nothingness inside me gave me a strange kind of strength. "This workshop is my place of business. You are trespassing. Get out. Now. And don't ever come back." She was taken aback by the deadness in my tone. She started to say something, some justification, some further threat. But I just kept looking at her with those empty eyes. She faltered, then turned and walked back to her car, without another word. I stood there holding the box of ruined tools, the ghosts of my grandfather's hands. They hadn't just taken my money. They hadn't just lied to me. They had salted the earth. They had made it clear that if I would not be their asset, they would make sure I had nothing at all. And that was their final mistake. Because a person with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous person of all. They thought they had left me with nothing. They forgot about my most valuable asset, my client list. I didn't try to salvage the tools. I took the box, taped it shut, and put it in the back of my closet, like a casket. Every time I looked at it, I wouldn't feel sadness. I would feel resolve. The next phase of my plan wasn't about emotion. It was about business. My business. The one they had dismissed as a hobby. I spent the weekend drafting a proposal. I documented my work on the secretary desk with before and after photos. I detailed the restoration process, and I created a portfolio of my other projects. On Monday morning, I didn't call Mrs. Albright's lawyers. I called Mrs. Albright herself. I told her the truth. Not the lie I told my family, but the real story. I told her I had sold her desk, that the money was intended as a down payment on a home for my daughter, and that my family had stolen it to bail my brother out of another failed business. I told her how I got the money back and what they did to my grandfather's tools in retaliation. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for pity. I stated the facts calmly and professionally, like I was describing damage to a piece of furniture. She was silent for a long time on the other end of the line. I thought I had made a terrible mistake, that she would see me as unstable, unprofessional. "Maya," she finally said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "The world is filled with talented people, but character is rare. What you did required immense character." She paused. "Send me your portfolio, and send me an estimate for what it would cost to replace those tools with the modern equivalent. Not the antique value, the functional value. Consider it a bonus for the exquisite work you did on my desk. And for your troubles. I was stunned. I stammered my thanks, and she cut me off. Don't thank me. Talent like yours should be protected from vultures, especially when they share your blood. 2 days later, a check arrived via courier. It was for more than I had asked for. Enough to replace my essential tools and cover 3 months of rent on a new workshop. There was a handwritten note enclosed. A new start. Let me know when you're set up. I have a Queen Anne highboy that needs a miracle worker. It was a lifeline. A lifeline they had no idea existed. While they were sitting in their house, smug in their belief that they had crippled me, I was already planning my escape. I found a small commercial space for lease in the next town over, a place with good light and solid floors. It was more expensive, but it was mine. Entirely mine. No shared walls, no shared power, no shared history. For the next 2 weeks, I moved. I did it quietly, mostly at night. I rented a small truck and moved my equipment, my woodstock, my life, piece by piece. The saw stop was the last thing to go. The day I was finally moved out, I walked back into the empty garage for the last time. It was just a concrete box again, smelling faintly of sawdust and ghosts. I swept the floor clean. I took the ugly painting off the door. Then I wrote a note and left it on the workbench. It said, "The rent for this space is now $1,000 a month, payable to me, as it adds significant value to your property. After all, it's a fully functional professional-grade workshop. Surely that has market value. Here is the invoice for the first month. P.S. I've changed my number." I didn't leave a forwarding address. I just locked the door, the one with my new lock on it, and drove away. I didn't look back. The silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I had ever heard. The peace lasted for 3 weeks. It was a strange, unnerving quiet. I threw myself into setting up the new workshop. Buying the new tools felt both like a betrayal of my grandfather and a liberation. They were cold, efficient, without history. They were mine alone. Mrs. Albright was true to her word, connecting me with 2 other collectors. My little hobby was suddenly a legitimate, thriving business with a waiting list. I enrolled Chloe in her new school. We found a small rental cottage, the kind I had dreamed of, with a little yard and a big oak tree. It was smaller than what I could have bought, but it was ours. The silence from my family was a gift, but I knew it wouldn't last. They weren't the type to let go. They were the type to regroup. The attack came from an unexpected direction. I got a letter in the mail, forwarded from my old address. It was from a lawyer. My parents were suing me. They were suing me for defamation of character and for the theft of workshop equipment they claimed was a family asset, which I had stolen when I moved out. They included a ridiculously inflated list of items, including the saw stop and a dozen other tools they had probably looked up on the internet. Their claim was that the workshop was a family business, and that I, in my unstable emotional state, had absconded with shared assets. But the most venomous part was the accusation of defamation. They claimed my fictitious story about a stolen client desk, a story Ethan had obviously repeated to them, had damaged their reputation in the community. They were twisting my lie, the one I had used to get my money back, into a weapon against me. It was brilliant. It was diabolical. And it was pure my mother. I sat there, holding the letter, and for the first time since this all began, I laughed. It was a bitter, tired laugh. They were going to burn the world down, rather than admit they were wrong. My first instinct was to panic. Lawyers, lawsuits. This was a world I knew nothing about. But then, I looked at the check stub from Mrs. Albright, and I remembered her words. Talent like yours should be protected from vultures. I called the number on her note. I explained the situation, my voice more tired than scared. "They're suing you with a lie that you told them?" she asked, a note of incredulous amusement in her voice. "Oh, this is rich. Don't worry, Maya. I have a lawyer. He's an absolute shark. He finds people like your parents to be a light snack. Let me make a call." The next day, I met her lawyer. He was an older man with sharp eyes and a suit that cost more than my car. He listened to my entire story, from the ink-stained high school project to the ruined tools to the lawsuit. He took notes, occasionally nodding. When I was done, he leaned back in his leather chair. "This isn't a lawsuit," he said. "This is a tantrum with a letterhead. It's designed to intimidate you, to bleed you dry until you come crawling back. They don't have a case, but that doesn't mean we can't have some fun with it." He explained the strategy. We would counter-sue, not just to have their case thrown out, but we would sue them for damages, for the intentional destruction of my property, the tools, for the business income I lost while relocating, and for the emotional distress caused by their campaign of harassment. "We have the check from your mother paying you back the exact amount you stole," he said with a grin. "That's a fun piece of evidence. It's an admission of guilt. They'll argue it was to placate a client, but any decent judge will see it for what it is. A payoff. And the box of ruined tools? Please tell me you kept it." "I did," I said. "It's in my closet." "Excellent," he purred. "We're not just going to defend you, Maya. We're going to make them pay for the box." The battle wasn't fought in a courtroom. It was fought through letters and depositions. My parents' lawyer quickly realized he was outmatched. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, was relentless. He subpoenaed their financial records, looking for the source of the money they had used to pay me back. He scheduled a deposition for Ethan. The day before he was scheduled to testify under oath, their lawyer called Mr. Davies. They wanted to drop the suit. "No deal," Mr. Davies told him. "Your clients initiated this war. Now we're going to finish it. My client's countersuit stands. We'll see you in court, unless you're ready to settle." They folded. They didn't have the money or the stomach for a real fight, not one where their actions would be laid bare under oath. They agreed to a settlement. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was significant. It covered my legal fees, the full antique value of my grandfather's tools, and a little extra for my pain and suffering. The most important part of the settlement, however, wasn't the money. It was the other condition Mr. Davies insisted on, a permanent restraining order. They were legally forbidden from contacting me or my daughter, from coming within 500 feet of my home or my place of business. When I signed the papers, I felt a profound sense of closure. Not of victory, but of finality. This was the door, locked and barred. This was the wall, built high and strong. I had my money. I had my business. I had my daughter. And I had my peace, legally mandated and paid for by them. I thought that was the end of the story. But there was one more chapter, one I never saw coming. A month after the settlement was finalized, I got a package in the mail. It was a small padded envelope with no return address, just my name and new workshop address printed on the label. My heart seized for a moment, thinking it was from them. A violation of the order. But the handwriting was unfamiliar. I opened it carefully. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a single small object. It was a vintage brass compass, old and heavy in my palm. Tucked beneath it was a letter, written on thick, cream-colored stationery. The letter was from my uncle, my mother's estranged younger brother, a man I hadn't seen since I was a child. He wrote that he'd heard about what happened through the family grapevine. The whispers that painted me as a monster who had extorted and abandoned her loving family. But he knew his sister. He wrote, "Your mother has always believed that the world owes her a masterpiece, and she was furious when it was given to you instead of her. She was a painter, you know, a very gifted one. But she gave it up when she married your father. She chose comfort over courage, and she has never forgiven the world, or herself for it. When she sees your talent, your hands, she doesn't see her daughter. She sees the ghost of the woman she was too afraid to become, and she will burn down anyone who reminds her of it." It was like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know existed. The jealousy, the sabotage, the dismissal of my work as a hobby, it all snapped into focus. It wasn't about Ethan being the golden child. It was about me being the reminder of her own failure. He went on to say he was proud of me, that I had broken a cycle that had poisoned their family for generations. He ended the letter with, "Your grandfather, my father, gave me this compass when I left home. He told me, it's for when you lose your way, so you can find true north again. I think you found yours. I don't need it anymore." I sat in my quiet workshop, the smell of cedar in the air, holding the compass in my hand. The needle trembled, then settled, pointing north. Tears I didn't know I had been holding back finally fell. They weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of understanding, of release. My family hadn't been a safe harbor. It had been a storm, and I had finally sailed out of it. Life now is quiet in a way it never was before. It's the gentle hum of the lathe, the soft scratch of sandpaper on wood, the sound of Chloe's laughter in our little backyard. My business is thriving. My work is my own. The story of what I do and the integrity behind it has become my brand. Mrs. Albright and her circle have kept me busy, and their referrals have led to more work than I can handle. I've even hired a part-time apprentice, a young woman fresh out of trade school with a fire in her eyes that I recognize. I don't know what happened to Ethan. I don't follow him. Don't ask about him. His potential is no longer my problem to fund, or his failures, my burden to carry. I heard through my uncle that my parents sold their house and downsized. Whether it was because of the settlement or their own bad decisions, I don't know. And I find that I don't care. The hole they left in my life has been filled, not with anger, but with light and air and peace. The lesson in all of this is not that family is a burden. It's that the word family is a title that must be earned, not just inherited. It's about who shows up, who respects your boundaries, who celebrates your success as if it were their own. It is not about sacrifice as a proof of love. True love doesn't demand you set yourself on fire to keep others warm. It brings you a blanket. I found my family. It's in the steadfast loyalty of a client who became a mentor. It's in the quiet understanding of an uncle who reached out across the years with a compass. It's in the fierce pride in my daughter's eyes when she watches me work. Sometimes, building your own life means you have to start with demolition. You have to tear down the structures that were built to contain you, the walls that were painted to look like a home, but were really a cage. It's terrifying, and it's messy, and you will be called a villain for saving yourself. But on the other side of that destruction is a clean, empty space, a foundation, and you can build anything you want on it. You can build a workshop. You can build a business. You can build a home where the only investment required is love, and the only potential that matters is your own. If you've ever felt like the designated fixer in your family, the one whose dreams are always on the back burner, I see you. I want you to know that your work, your passion, your hobby has value. Your future is not a resource for others to spend. Share your story in the comments below. We need to remind each other that saying no is not an act of selfishness. It's an act of survival. Thank you for listening.